Good morning, college football. EA Sports College Football 25 News, top 10 quarterback ratings and rankings revealed. The first 2024 spring game is in the books, plus news and notes from around the country after the stinger. Good morning, college football. It is episode 13. I am Nicholas Ian Allen of CampusToCanton.com and CFB Winning Edge. Thank you for joining us this morning. We're going to talk a little bit about the EA College Football 25 video games, some news and notes. I'm sure you saw a lot of stuff late last week and over the weekend, players opting in to the game. Plus, we've got our own video game ratings, and these are inspired by the video game. We've been doing this for 6 years or so. So we will run down at least the top 10 quarterbacks, probably include a little bit more than that as well. But first and foremost, if you have not already, please, we would very much appreciate you subscribe to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. Would love for you to give this video a like. Help us to build some momentum as we look forward to doing this show, an hour of college football news and insight, reaction, analysis, almost every day. And we missed it on Friday. There was some unfortunate unscheduled maintenance at CFB Winning Edge headquarters. Internet was out due to some work that was going on last week, and we weren't able to record or to stream, but very much appreciate you your patience with that and joining us again this morning. Campus to Canton is a college fantasy football company playing the C2C format that encompasses both college and NFL players. If you'd like to join a league, a great way to find one is in the C2C Discord. That is available for all of our membership tiers. You can go to the website, CampusToCanton.com. The Become a Member page has a breakdown of all of our membership tiers, from our $2.99 per month walk-on and recruiting tiers all the way up to our All-22 package. You also get a discount. Basically works out to 2 months free if you sign up for an annual membership. So do please check that out. But today we're going to flip our order a little bit and talk about our team of the day first, because we've got a spring game that has already come and gone. The Hawaii Rainbow Warriors had less of an official game, more of a public practice last night, Sunday evening, February 25th. There wasn't a whole lot of news and takeaways. In fact, head coach Timmy Chang mentioned after the game that a lot of the starters were held out. There was a major emphasis on keeping players healthy, particularly some of the top offensive players. Braden Schrager did not participate in the 11-on-11 team period, for example. But part of the reason for doing that was an effort to build depth for the 2024 Rainbow Warriors. And, Hawaii was the first to kick off spring practice about a month ago, late January. They wrapped up the 15 practice periods over the course of last month. Got a head start, as we've discussed before. Plenty of reasons maybe to do that. Part of it, as Chang mentioned, keeping players healthy, or maybe he was alluding to, if you do suffer an unfortunate injury, getting your spring practice done in February gives even more time to recover for those players who, are going to be needing that extra time to work their way back before the season begins. Hawaii is one of those teams that we expect to play a week 0 game. There was a change where their week 0 matchup against Oregon has been canceled. So currently right now, as we are 178 days, I believe is the countdown from week 0, we don't know for sure, if Hawaii is going to be playing in that opening week. There have been reports and some items leaking out here and there that perhaps a game will be scheduled to replace that Oregon season opener. Delaware State FCS opponent seems to be the most likely to fill that spot, but we will learn a little bit more as we get closer, perhaps as early as this week. It sounded like some of the reporting by folks like Christian Shimabuku of KHO News mentioned that the Hawaii schedule is not necessarily final, but expecting some news perhaps this week on an opponent. So there were some interviews with Timmy Chang, some other members of the Hawaii coaching staff and players leading up to the spring game. Brian McInnes of Spectrum News followed Timmy Chang, was there for some comments that he made leading into the weekend. Quoting here from McInnes's piece, we'll be controlling the reps and the play clock. We'll keep the tempo. What we need to do is we move the ball down the field, but we'll play out situations and scenarios, and we'll give guys looks that we want to get looks at, and we'll protect the guys that we don't want to get nicked up before the season, but they'll have fun and it'll look like football. Excited about that. McInnes also passed along some quotes from freshman All-American wide receiver Pofele Ashlock, who, touched on, if you didn't remember, Braden Schrager, the multi-year starting quarterback at UH, has or briefly entered the transfer portal. And we weren't 100% sure, if he would be making his way back to Hawaii. He did withdraw. So certainly great news there for the program, as they're looking to have some continuity at that receiver position, with Ashlock as one of the top returning wideouts, with Stephen McBride, who really had a breakout performance after transferring from Kansas. Both of those top two wideouts are back. But when a player enters the transfer portal, if he withdraws, there perhaps it would be reasonable to expect there could be some hurt feelings, perhaps. But as McInnes reported, as Ashlock said, most definitely not. I feel like it was more of a laugh off, and I told you so. You can't run from us type of thing. I was talking to Braden throughout the whole situation. While he was doing it, he was giving me some insight of it. Honestly, it was perfect for someone like him to do it. It showed me that the transfer portal is not always what it seems to be. Money to get thrown around in this college business all the time. It's not really the biggest thing in the world. For me, it's more about morale and where you come from. So I'm here. Braden's here. He knows what's up, and we're just happy that he's back. So there was also some speculation, as there would be anytime a group of five player has a highly productive season, that Ashlock might be someone who would be a candidate to jump in the transfer portal, perhaps try to move up to a power conference opportunity. But certainly, if you're here for the C2C, college fantasy football side of things, you're very happy that Ashlock specifically, McBride as well, are back and likely to be slotted in as the top two pass catchers targets for an experienced quarterback and Braden Schrager in what should be a prolific, run and shoot offense that Hawaii has put together. We also did get to see a little bit of the future. There are some videos tweeted out from the Hawaii Athletics and Hawaii football Twitter accounts with some touchdown passes from young quarterbacks, backup quarterbacks Michael Aleado and John Kewe Sagapolote. And my apologies if my mispronunciation there, but Hawaii, looking to build that depth, as Timmy Chang said after the event yesterday. There were some interviews, afterwards. Again, the focus of this spring period. This public spring game, they did call it a spring game, but it was really more of a practice, had a 7-on-7 competition, 11-on-11 action, some individual drills and stretching to kick off. Fans were there, autographs being signed, all of that. But if you were looking for any, major news, or, player X ran for 100 yards, player Y had 13 catches for 140 yards, that wasn't going to happen at this very first spring game. But do want to touch a little bit more, dig a little bit more into what we can expect from Hawaii as we look ahead to the 2024 season. Again, usually we save our team of the day for the last 10 to 15 minutes of each episode, but figured we might as well kick it off. Schrager getting back, was a junior last year, played in 13 games, had 525 pass attempts, threw for 3,500 yards, 3,542 yards, 26 touchdowns, was intercepted 14 times. 6.7 yards per pass attempt is something where we can certainly see some room for improvement, but the raw yardage number, quite good. Averaged 272.5 yards per game, averaged more than 10 yards as an average depth of target. So it's not necessarily that Schrager was just dinking and dunking all the time. There certainly are plenty of, shorter routes and quick game opportunities in the run and shoot and in this Hawaii offense for guys like Stephen McBride, who was more of a deep threat, went for over 1,000 yards, averaged 16.3 yards per catch, 63 catches, but Ashlock was a little bit more of the intermediate. Keole Shigaya was certainly one of the players who, on his 39 catches, his 48 targets, averaged just 5.4 on his ADOT. But as I mentioned, McBride coming back, Ashlock coming back, who had 83 catches, 832 yards. Both of them were on the receiving end of 9 touchdowns. Nishigawa back as well. Alex Perry, Nick Cynical, Jonah Pinoke, who was limited to 7 games due to injury, was expected to be one of those top receivers coming into the 2023 season, at least as it stands right now. All of those players are back. They are all included in our CFP Winning Edge returning production database. So the top 6 pass catchers, all of those players had at least 20 catches last year. All were targeted at least 27 times, including the leaders, McBride and Ashlock, who were combined targeted 220 times, combined for over 1,800 yards, those 18 touchdowns, as I mentioned. The running back situation, Landon Sims, converted from tight end at one point, is back as the leading rusher, but with only 255 yards. Schrager actually tied for the team lead with 2 rushing touchdowns. Sims scored once. David Cordero is back. He got a little bit of run towards the end of last season. And then Tylan Hines, who this time last year was expected to be the top running back, but similar to Pinoke, was limited by injury. He only appeared in 4 games, had 27 attempts for 93 yards and 0 touchdowns. He is back and fully healthy this year, so would expect that he's going to be working his way back toward the top of that depth chart. But the strength of this Hawaii offense, and it is an experienced one, as we mentioned, all those players coming back, they do rank 24th in our adjusted offensive returning production, number 8 overall, tops in the Mountain West in our returning production numbers. The CFP Winning Edge, C2C Winning Edge package is that passing offense. So would expect that this Hawaii offense, with Timmy Chang being the play caller, with Dan Morrison now coming in as the co-offensive coordinator, quarterbacks coach, they're ramping up that run and shoot even more than before. Defensively, Hawaii ranks 6th in adjusted returning production. Top tackler Peter Manuma is back. There's also, some players who were limited by injury on the defensive side of the ball who will be back. Logan Taylor is one of those, only appeared in 3 games as a linebacker last season. Cam Stone, versatile defensive back, playmaker on special teams as well. He was limited by injury, is back and fully healthy. And it looks like, according to our numbers, that 6 of the top 7 returning tacklers are back, 10 of the top 12. So Hawaii, very experienced team as we look ahead to the 2024 season. And as I mentioned, we don't know 100% just yet if Hawaii will be opening that week 0 game, but if so, expect it to be an FCS opponent, Delaware State being the most likely. And then, non-conference play, they do host UCLA on August 31st. That's week 1, currently listed as the first opponent. They do have a road trip to Huntsville, Texas to play Sam Houston. They also get a pretty well-respected FCS opponent in Northern Iowa coming to the Ching Complex in Honolulu on September 21st. We don't have dates yet for the Mountain West schedule, but we know that Hawaii will be going on the road to play Fresno State, San Diego State, Utah State, and then get Washington State also on the road as part of that scheduling agreement with the Mountain West for Washington State and Oregon State. Each of them play, each Mountain West team plays either Washington State or Oregon State. So Hawaii gets the trip to Pullman. Home games this year for Hawaii in conference play: Boise State, Nevada, New Mexico, and UNLV. So fairly tough schedule, a little early for me to especially since we don't have the finalized schedule, a little early to fully project what the win total should be. Hawaii was 5-8 last year. There certainly are a lot of winnable games in conference play, certainly at least 2, maybe 3 now, games where you would expect Hawaii might be favored in non-conference play. Not sure that they will be on the road at Sam Houston, but that I would expect would be pretty close to a toss-up. But this is a veteran team, most experienced team as far as our 2024 returning production numbers go in the Mountain West, and a team that should be competitive, and for fantasy purposes, a team that you would expect will put up some good numbers, especially in the passing game. All right, moving on to a little bit of news before we dig into our quarterback ratings. Sticking in the Mountain West, there were a couple of pieces, one on Friday, one over the weekend from Brent Brigham of the Gazette in Colorado Springs about Air Force, Mountain West rival for Hawaii. Talking about, who's coming back, certainly. Air Force is one of those teams who have kicked off spring practice, and they are on the extreme low end in our returning production numbers, actually currently rank 134th in our adjusted overall returning production. And a lot of new names. And Air Force is a program where it can be difficult to get information, but Brigham does a great job and offered a little bit of insight here. So as he mentioned in the piece, only 5 players who were starters last year for Air Force. How we in our CFB Winning Edge team profiles identify starter, someone who was a starter in more than half of that team's game. So there are only 5 players who meet that criteria in 2023. 2 of them on offense. They're both receivers, which if you know much about Air Force football, receivers don't get a ton of work, but Cade Harris and Jared Rostos are both back. 3 on defense, defensive lineman Peyton Zdroik, cornerbacks Jamari Bellamy and Jerome Galliard are expected to return. There is a little bit of uncertainty. Maybe another player or 2 could work their way back with what Air Force calls turnbacks. It's, a player or a cadet will be able to, take a semester off, be able to save that semester. There's been in the last couple of years, especially after so many players sat out the 2022 season at Air Force during the COVID pandemic. So still a little bit of uncertainty. Will they get 1 or 2 more experienced players back? There were a couple that showed up in the summer last year that we weren't expecting. So keep an eye out for that. But as it stands right now, according to Brigham, the top 2 quarterbacks or excuse me, the leading quarterback who appeared in the final 2 games for Air Force last year is junior John Busha. Running back is an area of relative experience. Aiden Calvert, who had 177 yards last season as a tailback, playing one of the running back positions at Air Force, has been working at fullback. And Brigham did a more in-depth piece on Calvert, who has added about 15 pounds. He's close to 200 now, playing that superback position, kind of cross-training at that position, which, again, for fantasy purposes, but also just, as far as knowing who the most productive running back in that Air Force offense has been traditionally, is the fullback. That is the position that Brad Roberts played, where he led the country in rushing. It's also the position last year that Michelle played at Air Force, who had a huge bowl game. Emmanuel Michelle finished with 935 yards rushing for the season, 11 touchdowns. So good to know that one of the most explosive running backs available for Air Force is going to perhaps see some time at that position. But Dylan Carson is actually still considered the front runner at fullback. Carson had 493 yards and 68 carries last season as Michelle's backup. The two of them, Calvert and Carson, still have an opportunity, I think, to be productive on the ground for Air Force. A bit of disappointing news in the Mountain West. Former UNLV starting quarterback Doug Brumfield has announced officially that he will medically retire. Brumfield started in 2022, was started the season for UNLV last year before suffering an injury, appeared in 6 games, 252 yards, 2 interceptions last year. Jordan Maeva stepped in and became Mountain West freshman of the year with a huge season, threw for over 3,000 yards, 17 touchdowns. And, we didn't really hear a lot of detail about Brumfield, sort of what was kind of what his situation was. It looked a little bit murky even after Maeva transferred to USC, that UNLV brought in a couple of highly experienced FCS transfers, most notably Matthew Sluka, we talked about a little bit last week with Andrew Katz. Expect that the Holy Cross transfer would probably be the quarterback to beat. They also brought in Haj Malik Williams, who actually ended up throwing for more yards at FCS Campbell than Sluka did last year. But those two players combined, 38 touchdown passes. Both are capable runners. And, we weren't necessarily sure what Brumfield's health was. It sounds like, unfortunately, it's in a position where he's not going to be able to continue playing college football. And so certainly wish him the best. And UNLV, we expect, will be competing with teams like Boise State, Hawaii, Air Force, very, very competitive Mountain West, it looks like on paper this year. And I expect UNLV to be one of our higher rated teams, with Sluka taking over most likely at quarterback. Expect that they will rate pretty high in our team strength ratings once we have those available later this spring. Very quickly, as we mentioned, Hawaii now concluding spring practice. Air Force started February 12th. Their spring game is March the 12th. Liberty, we've mentioned, is also kicked off their spring already. Their spring game is March 2nd, the next one on the calendar, according to Brandon Marcello of 247 Sports, who put together a great calendar that we can reference. Appalachian State has already kicked off spring practice as well. We've noted that Georgia State started and then stopped their spring practice after Sean Elliott resigned as head coach. This week, we get more than half a dozen teams kicking off. Missouri and Auburn and SMU will be starting their spring practices on Tuesday, February 27th. Clemson kicks off on Wednesday, the 28th. Bowling Green and BYU on February 29th, Leap Day. And then on Friday, Army will kick off March 1st So some very, very interesting teams. Been reading a lot about Missouri and Auburn, a lot of spring practice previews out there, and a lot of great information. I'm sure we'll be talking a lot about plenty of Tigers, Missouri, Auburn, Clemson very soon, as well as SMU, Bowling Green, BYU, and Army. Some very quick notes before we dig into those quarterback ratings. It's official at Georgia State. Former Georgia running backs coach Dell McGee has been announced as the new head coach of the Panthers. He, along with Georgia wide receivers coach Brian McClendon, leaving for the NFL, opened a couple of assistant coaching spots for the Bulldogs. Those have reportedly both been filled. James Coley, who, like McClendon and McGee, highly regarded as a recruiter and former offensive coordinator at Georgia, though that didn't go particularly well. He's back. Most recently had a short stint at South Carolina. I think he was there for 43 days, but is moving back to Athens to take over as wide receivers coach. And according to Matt Zenitz of 247 Sports, Georgia is expected to hire Georgia Tech wide receivers coach Josh Crawford as its running backs coach. So both of those spots currently appear to be filled in Athens. UCLA has a new offensive coordinator. We mentioned on Thursday with Brandon Sanders that Eric Bieniemy had reportedly moved to the top of the candidates list for new head coach Deshaun Foster. In an email to ESPN on Saturday, Eric Bieniemy mentioned, that he is from Southern California, attended high school there, started his career in the NFL with the Chargers in Southern California. This is quoting Bieniemy's email from ESPN.com. It's obviously great to be back with the Bruins, where I was previously employed. Eric Bieniemy was, of course, a longtime NFL assistant, was the offensive coordinator, and won 2 Super Bowls with the Kansas City Chiefs from 2018 to 2022. Spent 16 years total in the NFL, was most recently the offensive coordinator of the Washington Commanders, did interview for the head coaching job with the Commanders, also interviewed for multiple NFL offensive coordinator jobs. This will be his first time returning to college since he was the offensive coordinator at Colorado from 2011 to 2012. Couple of transfer notes. Jacoby Matthews, starter in the secondary for Texas A&M, recently entered the transfer portal. Big name, a lot of turnover in that Texas A&M secondary as we look ahead to 2024. A little bit of an unknown situation, exactly how it's going to shake out for Arizona cornerback Tacario Davis, who is a starter for the Wildcats. He entered the transfer portal, has not officially committed elsewhere, has not officially withdrawn, but according to the Arizona Daily Star, Davis is listed on the 2024 roster and was recently seen working out with teammates in Tucson. So perhaps some good news there for Arizona as they're able to, it sounds like, keep one of their top defensive backs, one of their top defensive players from last season. Quite a few things going on at Texas State, and Arizona connection. Former Arizona quarterback Jaden DeLora, who was a one-time Texas State quarterback transfer commit, will instead go pro. He announced his intention to enter the NFL draft. Things did not work out for him at Texas State. Perhaps the interest in him due to some of the off-field reports make it so that DeLora just wasn't going to have an opportunity in major college football. So instead, he will test the NFL waters and professional football as a whole. Texas State linebacker Dan Foster entered the portal late last week. He was not highly productive, but was a full-time starter for the Bobcats following his transfer from Marshall last season. And then a big-time transfer who signed with the Bobcats, defensive lineman Tamis Adelier, has apparently been suspended. This according to the University Star, the local student newspaper. There were some quotes here from Dean of Students, from there was a statement put out by the university saying, after being made aware of the charges, we have suspended Tunmis Adelie, my apologies for mispronunciation, from the football team pending the investigation. The matter has been referred to the Dean of Students for further review. Due to federal student policy, we are unable to provide more information. All right, so what probably a lot of you have been waiting for, we turn our attention to the EA Sports College Football 25 video game. There was some news late last week on Friday. Reporting in The Athletic, among other places, mentioned that players who opt in to the game to allow their name, image, and likeness to be featured will receive $600 and a copy of the game, which is valued at $70. Some news from the game itself, if you don't remember, way back in EA Sports NCAA 14 and previous editions, the rosters were smaller, did not include 85 scholarships. I believe it was 55 for a lot of the time. It might have bumped up a little bit in the most recent years. Honestly, it's been a while since I played the game. But according to The Athletic, an EA Sports spokesperson mentioned that up to 85 players per school will appear on the initial roster. So we expect to have expanded rosters there. All 134 FBS teams are officially in the game. You probably saw all the graphics posted on Twitter from the various, official team sites, and had the "We're in the game." We saw a lot of updates on the announcers, including Kirk Herbstreit, who's been a longtime voice in the game. There was a video that Chris Fowler tweeted out sharing some of his work on the video game. So, among the highest profile announcers in college football will be featured in the game. A lot of ESPN personalities, in addition to those two, are expected to be in the game as well. One kind of interesting note mentioned that the players have an opportunity to opt in. If they do not, there will be a generic player avatar who will take that player's place. So instead of, quarterback number 13 at USC last year, if Caleb Williams, for example, who of course will not be in the game, at least on the traditional roster, the situation is a little bit different than it was however many years ago, almost 10 years ago. But there will be, if you remember, long ago when EA Sports had MVP Baseball, there was Barry Bonds, who was not part of the MLB Players Association and wasn't featured in the video games. I think his name was John Dowd in the game. Be a similar situation, it sounds like, for players who do not opt in to the game. Some teams, some players are not eligible for the $600 NIL payment. Air Force, Army, and Navy do not allow NIL payments for athletes. So there's a little bit of unknown exactly how that situation will totally work out. I think that EA Sports is trying to find a way to make sure that those players are compensated at some point in the long term, but they will be allowed to opt into the game, but will not be allowed to receive those payments initially. And we want to talk a little bit about, sort of the work we do at CFB Winning Edge and sort of how this all connects. If you're unfamiliar with our background, we've been doing this. CFB Winning Edge team profiles debuted in 2018, and they really were inspired by the video game. The EA Sports NCAA football video game. One of the things, I had a little extra time on my hands than expected. Don't want to get too long-winded here, but had an opportunity to sit back and think about what sort of work I wanted to concentrate on and to fully focus on, college football basically is what I decided, and wanted to build out something that was a little bit different. This was again in 2018. The video game had been discontinued a few years prior. There wasn't any real expectation that it would be coming back anytime soon. And so, thought, hey, why don't I take my, kind of insight as a longtime player of that video game. I kind of understood that when a true freshman signed, the best of the best, the highest overall player rating that they would get coming in was about an 85. If you thought of Trevor Lawrence at the time, was basically perfect, 247 rating, perfect recruiting rating coming in out of high school. But if he were in the video game, he would probably be an 85. So, I thought, all right, if we take those recruiting ratings and give true freshmen an 85 and then try to stagger it up, get a little bit of, a bump for experience, because each year, if you simulate through the off season, players increase their player rating a little bit just based on experience. And that's understandable because players, go through a spring practice where they, get better. They go through a full season of workouts and things like that. So they get better just, without even maybe getting any playing time. But also, if you're playing the game and perhaps you take over a program that doesn't recruit particularly well or relies on 2-star, 3-star players who, because we're such great coaches, play callers and whatnot, as we're playing with those players, you have the ability to build their ratings. You go out, put up huge numbers, Heisman contender, and a player who was 74 at the start of the season might be like a 90 by the end, based on how well they play on the field. So I wanted to figure out a way to do that as well. That was right around the time that guys like Baker Mayfield and Lamar Jackson were leaving college football, neither of whom were super highly rated. Mayfield, famously a former walk-on. Lamar Jackson, signed at Louisville, wasn't a 5-star, prospect coming out of high school. And so by the time that they left, both Heisman Trophy winners, both incredibly productive college players, and now NFL stars, they would have been, 99 overall players by the time that they were done. So I wanted to think of okay, how would we make a rating for a player like that to allow them to increase their overall rating, become a better player. And all this was being done in Google Sheets and spreadsheets, right? So came up with some criteria for various position groups, for quarterbacks. A 300-yard passing game might be worth a 1-point bump. A 100-yard rushing game might be worth a 1-point bump. Receivers, certain numbers of yardage. Maybe somebody gets an extra point for being an all-conference player. On the defensive side of the ball, a couple of sacks might be worth a point. Like if you have one big game and have 2 sacks, maybe you add a point to your overall player ratings. Maybe 50 tackles over the course of a season might be worth an extra point. So it took a little bit of trial and error, but since 2018 and having completed our sixth season in 2023, I came up with what I feel like is a pretty good overall way of doing it. It did have to change a little bit from the video game itself, which, as I mentioned, 99 was the highest overall rating. We always had 100 as ours, just as a little bit of a differentiator. But leading up to 2023, I wanted to figure out how we were going to show even more of how the best teams and the best players could sort of maximize their rating. So I no longer capped up an overall player rating at 100. This will come up a little bit later and in future weeks. But all right, so what we are talking about here, our highest rated quarterbacks as we look ahead to 2024. Now, will these be exactly the top 10 quarterbacks or the exact ratings that you can expect to see in the EA Sports 25 video game? Probably not, but there is a little bit of a method to it. I mentioned, using those talent ratings at the very beginning. We used 247 Sports for our first 5 years, in the 247 composite. After doing some offseason research last year, actually made the change to use On3's industry ratings because it incorporated, I don't know, I just sort of made the change, like the way that they had that set up. So we take our On3 recruiting rating, we adjust for experience, 85% for true freshmen, all the way to 93%. There's an average there for experience, and then add points for how players produce on the field. There are players outside of our top 10 in our player ratings who you could expect perhaps EA Sports is going to be a little bit higher on. If you pay attention to the Campus to Canton YouTube channel, there's plenty of expectation that Carson Beck is maybe the best quarterback in college football. He's certainly going to be on the very, very short list of NFL draft prospects as we look ahead to 2025. After going through all of our player ratings for at the end of the 2023 season, and the fact that Carson Beck wasn't a 5-star recruit, so a little bit lower rated just based on his experience heading into last year, was productive, but not necessarily a superstar video game numbers type performer. Carson Beck right now sits 18th in our quarterback ratings. These are unofficial for 2024, but just as an example there, guys who we're going to be very, very high on in CFF, like Garrett Green, who's like a top 5, 6, 7 quarterback right now. He is 19th. Jalen Milroe was a top 10 Heisman finisher last year in Heisman voting. He is 17th in our quarterback ratings. So those players in particular, especially Beck and maybe Milroe, probably are going to be a little bit higher in the ratings when the video game is officially released. Maybe a Riley Leonard be a little bit higher up there as well. But looking at our numbers, and again, these are based on what actually their ratings were coming out of high school and what actually production level they've had to this point in their college careers. Our number 10 quarterback, extra year of eligibility because he didn't play last year, is Cam Rising at Utah. Has started 25 games in his career, none of them last season, unfortunately. 2018 recruit, but an experienced player, so maxed out at his experience rating at a 93. His overall video game rating in our CFB Winning Edge team profiles is a 95.3. One spot ahead of Cam Rising is Jalen Daniels, another quarterback who was limited by injury last season. And this is where things change a little bit. Last season, On3, as I said, was our primary, starting point for recruiting ratings. One of the things that made me decide to go with On3 instead of 247 is they have kind of an additional player rating after a player has come on the scene, has started to become a starter or a contributor at the college level. And so even though Jalen Daniels was a 3-star recruit coming out of high school, a little bit of an unknown, On3 bumped his rating up to a 92. So that gave us a little bit more of a higher starting point, which I think was fair, was understood that he was a player who was more talented than perhaps that recruiting rating coming in. So his experience was adjusted off of that 92 rating instead of the 81, 82, something like that. It would have been. He was productive as a starter coming into 2023. Was a little bit in the beginning of the season as well, but currently sits at a 95.5 in our player ratings. Number 8 on our list, somewhat similar situation. Seth Hennigan got a little bit of a bump from On3 after his recruiting rating. He is the quarterback at Memphis, has been a starter since a true freshman. So he's had an opportunity to really kind of rack up those production points as we call them. If we were just looking at just experience and that initial recruiting rating, where he was 84, 85 coming out of high school, he wouldn't be nearly this high in our rankings. Wouldn't rank ahead of players like Cam Ward, Garrett Green, Carson Beck, Jalen Milroe, as I mentioned. But Seth Hennigan, longtime starter, he is somebody who's going to be a 95. Number 7, Shedeur Sanders, and a little bit of a unique situation because he kind of the opposite of a Jalen Daniels or Seth Hennigan, is a player who was a 4-star recruit coming out of high school, but took the FCS route his first couple of years. I'm sure everybody here is familiar with Shedeur Sanders. Don't have to explain too much, but he was able to rack up some production as an FCS player. We do incorporate FCS production into these overall player ratings. That's why Cam Ward, is a 91, even though he's an unrated player coming out of high school. Somebody we talked about earlier, Matthew Sluka, he's an 89 because he was highly productive as the quarterback at Holy Cross the last few years. Shedeur Sanders similarly, and then of course exploded onto the college football scene as a true junior in 2023. He is currently 7th in our QB ratings. There's been a lot of speculation out there. Will he be the top rated quarterback in EA Sports College Football 25? Perhaps. So we might be a little bit low on Shedeur Sanders, but I think as a top 10 quarterback, certainly understandable. Is he a top 5 quarterback? That's up for debate. We'll find out for sure when the quarterback rankings and the EA Sports ratings are officially unveiled later this summer. Number 6 in our video game quarterback ratings, CFP Winning Edge, is Quinn Ewers. He's in that Trevor Lawrence mold, an almost perfect recruiting rating. Sometimes, the production doesn't quite match that expectation coming out of high school. Quinn Ewers had a solid year last year, added 6 production points to his overall player rating, but hasn't quite been an elite producer on the field just yet. Nevertheless, the fact that the raw talent is there, the fact that he has gained some experience over the last few years, comes in as one of the highest rated quarterbacks in our calculation. So number 6 in our 2024 video game ratings as it stands right now. One spot behind number 5, and this one perhaps a little bit controversial, but DJ Uiagalelei, transfer to Florida State, who has officially opted in to the game. A lot of these players have. But DJU was, in that elite 5-star quarterback category as a true freshman coming in. So he came in pretty close to that 85 in his overall rating. Was productive, in a couple of spot starts in 2020 when Trevor Lawrence was sidelined briefly. But everyone knows his first full year as a starter in 2021 didn't go particularly well. So there are probably plenty of folks out there who say, no way in the world should DJU be, a top 5 quarterback. But the way we calculate it, and we try not to downgrade players often. We do sometimes, but we're much more likely to try to upgrade somebody with that, boosted on 3 rating than we are to pull a player down. It's only happened, a handful of times in the 6 years we've done it. And I'm glad that we didn't, honestly, because last year DJU had a very, very solid season at Oregon State. And, is he legitimately one of the 5 best quarterbacks in college football? Maybe not. But one of the things that I try to keep in mind and kind of why we do this is, on the video game itself, sometimes you have highly rated guys who don't play very much, or if they do play, don't necessarily, put up huge stats. Maybe for whatever reason, injuries always occur, or sometimes the playbook's just not a good fit, or a particular, the talent around them doesn't quite work out. So sometimes you get some really, really highly rated players who don't, put up huge stats. On the flip side, sometimes you get some pretty low rated players who do, guys who overachieve. So, I haven't said a Noah Fafita yet. he's somebody I know in CFF circles who's right now being drafted ADP wise as a top 10 quarterback, has arguably the best wide receiver in the country to throw to. He's 32nd in our ratings, but would he play, at a top 10 level? Perhaps. But is he, has he earned that 95 or better, video game rating? At least not the way that we calculate it quite yet. So DJU, love him or hate him, impressed with him or not, was pretty productive last year at Oregon State, and his transfer to Florida State is going to be impactful, and he is a 97 rated player. Just a few percentage points ahead of him is somebody who has really improved their rating due to production on the field, and that's Kaidon Salter. Liberty quarterback, led the Flames, wasn't even the starter at the very beginning of the season, but eventually won that job full time, exploded onto the scene, led Liberty to an undefeated season, Conference USA championship in their first season in the conference, and then to a New Year's Six bowl. So major impact at the quarterback position, and somebody who is, a perfect example in my mind, even though he was a 4-star rated player, originally signed with Tennessee before he ended up at Liberty, but somebody who can excel in an offense that is just tailor-made to showcase his strengths. And Kaidon Salter, I think, is the perfect Jamey Chadwell quarterback. That played out incredibly well with 14 production points last year. So, whether it was a 300-yard game or, hit a certain rushing benchmark, was an all-conference caliber player of the week, things like that. Those are all the things that we track and add a production point. His 14 production points were the most of any player last season who is returning in 2024 at the quarterback position. So it was more than Byron Brown, who we haven't mentioned, but is somebody who, is knocking on the door of a 90 rating. He's in the 30s right now in our quarterback ratings, but certainly you could argue is deserving of a little bit higher. He had 12 production points last year. Jordan McLeod also had 12 production points at James Madison, currently in the transfer portal. He is 21st in our ratings. And Garrett Green had 10. So among quarterbacks who had double-digit production points last year, that's a pretty fun group of players, whether or not they're towards the high end of our video game ratings. But Kaidon Salter has broken into that top 4 pretty elite area there at just over 97.5. A player who was highly productive earlier in his career. Last season, again, hurt by injury. So some of these guys you might be surprised that they're, in our top 10s, the Cam Risings, the Jalen Daniels, and now the KJ Jeffersons, in part because we didn't see it last year. I've played with it a little bit in the past. Should I reduce the amount of production that a player got as a freshman if he hasn't really shown it the last couple of years? Grayson McCall might be an example of that. He's been limited by injury each of the last 2 years, but his redshirt freshman season at Coastal Carolina was, so incredible. Now, as he transfers up to NC State, hasn't been as productive, especially without Jamey Chadwell as his play caller. Is he deserving of a high 90s type rating? There's a question to be made. He has 21 production points prior to 2023, had just 1 last season. So, should he get a little bit of a reduction there because it's been a while since he's been productive? Not sure. If we make that decision, a player like KJ Jefferson would fall a little lower on our list. But as it stands, it was a guy who, had an 89 or so, 90.3 basically on 3 rating coming into high school. So not the elite end, but his rushing production and also, some of the good work he did throwing the football at Arkansas early in his career, added 14 production points. Last season was limited to just 1, comes in at a 98.9 in our video game ratings, 3rd best in the country. And he's one of those players who, making the transfer to UCF seems like an absolute perfect fit. So I'm not highly motivated to reduce KJ Jefferson's overall player rating. I think that, we've seen he can be one of the most productive quarterbacks in college football, and think that he really is in a perfect situation there with Gus Malzahn as his head coach and play caller at UCF to be, a top 5, top 3 type quarterback. So I'm not going to argue too much with where he came out in our calculations here. Another one who, maybe some folks will raise their eyebrow at a little bit, Jackson Dart. Ole Miss is our second highest rated quarterback at this point, coming back in 2024. He is one of 2 quarterbacks who will enter the 2024 season with a rating over 100. He's got a 100.57 rating. And, part of that, he was a very highly rated recruit, but he's been productive, had 8 production points prior to 2023, had 5 last season. So, he's just been a consistent good player. Is he, the most efficient all the time? No. Is he capable of doing some, making some mistakes and turning the ball over at times? Did only have 5 interceptions last year, threw for 3,300 yards, can run it a little bit, had 8 touchdowns, nearly 400 yards on the ground. And because Jackson Dart rates so highly, I expect Ole Miss to rank quite high in our team strength power ratings once all is said and done and we're ready to reveal those this spring. Definitely expect Ole Miss will be a top 10 team, potentially in the 5, 6, 7 range. We shall see. But Jackson Dart, an experienced quarterback, multi-year starter, now going into his 3rd year at Ole Miss, but also get a little bit of a taste of what he could do as a freshman at USC. He comes in as our 2nd highest rated player. And number 1 is a transfer, one of 3 transfers playing for a new team in 2024, is new Oregon quarterback Dillon Gabriel. Of course, we got to see what he could do as a true freshman at UCF, was productive, piled up 16 production points at UCF. And then, last year at Oklahoma was productive as well. 7 production points in 13 games. So more than half the time he's playing well enough to earn an extra point added to his video game rating. We've got Dillon Gabriel at a 103.7. He is a senior, so he's not going to get an additional experience bump in 2024. But, Dillon Gabriel and the transition from Bo Nix to Gabriel is one reason, again, we're going to be very, very high on Oregon. They are mostly kind of a consensus, it seems like, in a lot of the way too early and kind of pre-spring top 25s. Most folks right now have them slotted in at number 3 behind Georgia and Ohio State. I would expect that we will be in a similar spot, certainly top 5, I would think. But Dillon Gabriel as our highest rated quarterback in our video game rating calculations is a big part of that. So again, these ratings and the way we do it, I know they are not perfect. I know they are not, we don't have things like an awareness rating or a speed rating, agility, throw power, accuracy, all that sort of stuff that EA Sports does. Ours are a fairly simple approximation, but we have a reason for why we do it. And we've got a track record, I think, of success. And the most important piece of this is not necessarily to say, oh, Dillon Gabriel's the best quarterback in college football. You could argue that, that you could argue that 7 or 8 other guys are better. But we try to take what is sort of an understanding of a player's raw talent coming in, or at least, how they are graded according to industry experts as high school recruits. Take that as the first piece. Throw in an adjustment for experience, because players do, get better with age. There's a cap to that, and there are arguments to perhaps, we shouldn't give much of a bump after sophomore year, junior year, something like that, because there is a little bit of a plateau perhaps that happens. But things like off-season workouts, things like spring practice, that adds into it. And then what do you do on the field? One thing that you could say, we don't do a great job of capturing is a player who hasn't gained any on-field experience, and that's a fair argument. We have incorporated a projected production where we do go ahead and preemptively add, 2, 3, 5 points, depending on if a player is just going into one of those perfect situations with a play caller, scheme-wise, or we just know, hey, this guy is talented enough that we should give him a little bit of a ratings boost. We do try to do that. We try to limit it because we don't want to, put too much of our own personal opinion in it. Want it to be somewhat based in, these numbers that are a little more concrete. But that is something, why maybe a Noah Fifita will get a little bit of a bump going into next year. Maybe a Byron Brown will get a little bit of a bump. So as it stands right now, again, these are not perfect. These are not necessarily the exact overall ratings that you'll get in College Football 25, but these are inspired by the video game. I think that they are, on par. And like I said, the track record is pretty good because we use these individual ratings, build them up into position group ratings, build them into overall unit ratings for offense and defense, put those together in our roster strength ratings for the whole team, add to that several other factors like coaching and team performance. That gives us our overall team strength power ratings. And we use those to project point spreads. And you can look at our history, how we compare to some of the top minds and top models in the industry over the past few years. We stack up quite well with that. So this is the way we do it. It's not perfect, but as it stands right now, our top 10 quarterbacks at this point, as we look ahead to 2024, entering this season, are Cam Rising of Utah, Jalen Daniels of Kansas, Seth Hennigan at Memphis, Shedeur Sanders at Colorado, Quinn Ewers of Texas. That's 10 through 6, respectively. Our top 5 is new Florida State quarterback DJ Uiagalelei. Number 4, Liberty's Caden Salter. Number 3, UCF's KJ Jefferson. Number 2, Ole Miss Jackson Dart. Number 1, Oregon's Dylan Gabriel. I'm sure plenty of folks will want to argue with our numbers. Again, this is just the way that we calculate it. But if you have something that you'd like to share with us, please drop us a comment. But do check out the Campus Canton YouTube channel. Subscribe, like this video. If you will, we will be running down some more position groups later this week as well, running backs, wide receivers, for sure. But that's going to do it for this morning, episode 13 of Good Morning College Football. I am Nicholas Ian Allen of CampusToCanton.com, and we will see you again tomorrow.